Misty Valley Cooperative presents When We Were Gone Astray. The paths of the world twist and turn, taking you to unexpected places. Welcome to the haunted town of Assembly, and to the strange lands around it. The days are growing shorter, and the nights are chill. So put another log on the fire. Find a comfortable chair. Sit back. Relax. Listen. Chapter 5. Ring of Fire. The apple orchard lay a short distance from the barn, in an area of level ground surrounded on three sides by forest. Over the years the forest had crept in, and now there was no clear boundary between them. The place was isolated and unvisited, save for the deer that often grazed there and foraged for apples each fall. "The well is back there," Fletch pointed. "You can just see it through the weeds." "Who drowned there, I wonder?" Silver said. "I got the feeling Louise Harbor thought the place was cursed. She knew more about it than she was saying." "Probably a kid, don't you think?" said Fletch. "Maybe it was a girl, and her ghost wanders the town at night, swimming in the stream and looking for someone to drag down under the water." Silver turned. "You're creeping me out, Red Boy. Is that really what she called you?" "That's what it sounded like." "You were wearing a bathrobe. What color?" "Blue," said Fletch. "But maybe she's colorblind." "She wouldn't drown you," Silver insisted. "She gave you marbles and a teacup." They reached the well. "The cover's fallen in," Fletch observed. "I guess it pretty much rotted away. The well looks kind of nice with the moss growing on the stones, like something out of a fairy tale." He scraped away at one of the stones, and soon deep-cut letters began to appear. "All is well." "Now, the big question," said Silver. "Who's going to look in first, you or me?" "I think we should do it together." "Okay, then," Silver nodded. "Here goes." The first thing Fletch noticed was that the water below them seemed perfectly still, like a deep blue mirror. The second thing he noticed were tiny lights, like the pinpricks of golden stars. Fletch glanced at Silver and then looked up, but the trees obscured his view of the late afternoon sky. "It's night down there," said Silver, "wherever there is." "I'm just glad not to see any ghosts," Fletch murmured. "What do you see?" The question wasn't Silver's. It came from within himself, from the old creature stirred enough from slumber to open one green eye. "Stars," Fletch replied. "Not stars," the wolf told him. "Sparks." "I never done it," Fletch whispered. "Done what?" Silver asked. Fletch stared at him blankly, unable to answer, and the wolf kept silent. "Are you okay?" Silver's voice was gentle. Fletch managed a nod. "I think so. They're decorating. Let's go carve a pumpkin." "Friendly or scary?" Silver asked. "Scary," said Fletch, "with teeth." As evening descended, they sat on the porch steps, turning the pumpkin around to try and judge the best side. Silver sketched the features with a magic marker. An evil grin with wicked-looking fangs, then triangular eyes slanted with menace. He cut around the stem, opening a hole to scoop out the seeds, dumping them into a wet pile on a piece of newspaper they had spread on the top step. Using a serving spoon, he scraped the inside of the pumpkin until it was free of pulp. Then he began to carve out the holes for the eyes. "You're safer with blades than I am. You want to do the teeth?" Fletch raised an eyebrow, attempting a Bela Lugosi stare. "I want to bite your neck." "Not until after dark. You should still be asleep in your coffin." Fletch looked downcast. "It sucks to be a vampire." "If you make me laugh," said Silver, "I'll cut my thumb." "Promises, promises." Fletch took the knife and began carving the fangs. "I'm not lonesome," he thought. "I'm not sad. But something's different. This world's new, but there's an old world underneath it." He looked toward the highway and felt a sudden longing. He smelled the smoke of his father's pipe drifting all the way from the common garden. They would go inside later, and his father would brew a pot of tea. Fletch would ask about an article Mark was reading in Harper's. They would sit in the study or the parlor or on the porch. Mark would smoke his pipe, and his words would be a soft rumble like a blanket on a cold night. Fletch turned and looked toward the lane that led through the cemetery and down into the forest. He felt the trees drawing in for the winter. He felt the cooling of the earth around their roots and the dampness in the air. He saw a fox trotting among the distant gravestones and felt its hesitancy as it became aware of him. Lightly he touched Silver's arm. "Look." As they watched the fox disappear among the stones, Fletch breathed in the spice of the autumn evening and opened himself to as much of the world as he dared. Mark and Liz came around the corner of the house with bundles of dry cornstalks, and Silver got up to help tie them around the columns on the veranda. "Doesn't take much to make this old place look haunted," Mark told them. "What do you think?" Silver gave him the thumbs up. "You could use cheesecloth for spiders' webs. That's what they did at the co-op." "Cheesecloth? Why didn't I think of that?" Mark climbed down from the stepladder. "Your mother told me about the painting." "Yes, the big stormy-looking one. You'll never guess who bought it." "She told me. Leonard Bernstein." "You're kidding!" Fletch exclaimed. "Really? The conductor?" "The one and only," Liz said with a nod. "I don't know where he lives, but I hope he's got space for it." "Finished." Fletch lit the candle stub inside the jack-o'-lantern and turned it for everyone to see. "That looks seriously wicked," said Silver. "Silver tells me you guys are building the haunted house for the carnival at school," Liz said. "If it's as scary as that jack-o'-lantern, I'm not sure I have the courage to visit." "We need music," Fletch told her, "something really creepy." "Well, since we're thinking about Mahler and Bernstein, have you heard the Kindertoten Lieder?" "No. What's that?" "Songs for Dead Children," said Liz. "I think it's the creepiest thing Mahler ever wrote." "That sounds perfect." "I'll lend you the record if you like. Even if you don't decide to use it, it's worth a listen." "Fletch likes John Dowland, Mom," Silver told her. "I thought you were the only one." "Hold on, I like Dowland," Mark put in. "And Bird and Thomas Tallis. Liz, did I ever lend you Noah's Flood?" "No," she said, "but you keep promising." "But that's Benji the Brit," Fletch protested. "Yeah, but he uses Tallis' eighth tune," his father reminded him. "What about Elvis?" Silver suggested. "I mean, for the carnival. Devil in Disguise?" He leapt from the top of the stool to the porch, catching the stool as it fell and setting it upright. Fletch laughed. Silver bent and took the jack-o'-lantern, placing it on the stool. Dusk fell. "He's ordinary at the moment," Fletch thought. "There's a hole in the knee of his jeans. There's a scratch on his cheek from the blackberry brambles. His hair is in his eyes. When he looks at me, my heart races. When he leaves at night, all the starlight follows." He felt the back of his neck prickle and turned to see Elizabeth Kendall watching him, her questions unspoken. "We're together," he said, his voice a little unsteady. "Silver and I. We've been meaning to tell you." She nodded. Mark came to him. "Sorry, I don't know why I'm crying," said Fletch. "It's okay." His father took his hand. "We kind of figured that's what was going on." "You're not mad?" Mark shook his head. "How could we be mad?" Silver sat beside him. "You okay?" Fletch nodded. "How about you?" "Well, my heart's pounding. Maybe I was more scared than I thought." "I think you're both very brave," Liz said. "And by the way, your pumpkin's burning." Silver stood up quickly and lifted the top section of the jack-o'-lantern by the stem. The candle flame had scorched it. "Ring of fire," he said. "That would work, but we'd need some way to make the smoke." Questions. Merritt Nelms picked up a broken stone disc, about the size of a quarter, with a hole bored through the center. He handed it to Callie. "Does she find all these things in the creek?" "No, that's a bad mud bead," Susanna informed them. "This one's the creek." She lifted a circle of worn glass, threaded onto a strip of leather. "How about the marbles?" "Grandmother's house, the singing lady who lived in the woods. Nellie likes old games like marbles and jacks and the mumbly one with knives." "She plays with knives?" her mother asked. "That doesn't sound safe at all. Did Nellie ever say where she lived? Is her house here in town?" "She doesn't like houses," Susanna insisted. "She just makes places by the water. Maybe she comes from the covered bridge place." Doc became very still. "What covered bridge place?" Susanna pointed in the direction of the street. "The one outside." "You mean that sometimes our bridge, the one over the creek, is a covered bridge?" Susanna nodded. "It's the place with the silver girl." "Who is the silver girl?" Callie asked her. "Is she a different girl from Nellie?" "She's a whole completely different girl. That time, you remember, when I got the apples, I saw her, when she had that bracelet thing on her ankle. But she drives the same truck." Susanna sat back in her chair and folded her hands, a mirror image of her father. "I think it's magic. Nellie's magic, and the silver girl is magic. She made me green." It was a conversation that contained just enough nonsense for Doc to believe it. "Something is going on," he said to Callie. "The other night, Fletch stepped into that room downstairs, a room 28 years in the past, and brought back fireflies." "Do you think Fletch is causing it?" his wife asked. "I don't know. If so, he doesn't realize it. He isn't doing it intentionally." He began putting the odd trinkets into the little box Susanna kept on the mantelpiece. "I'm going to talk with Betsy Weathers. She believes the world is made up of multiple realities, each one a little different from the rest. And she says certain people have the ability to move back and forth between them, through the paths that she calls the forked ways." Callie shook her head. "Sounds like weird physics to me." "Yes, but no more weird than trolls and silver girls. And this is assembly, after all." Susanna's troll appeared to be solid, a real person in the real world. Doc wasn't so sure that the same could be said about the silver girl, or the wizard boy Fletch had seen at the end of the covered bridge, or about the bridge itself, for that matter. And then there were the fireflies. Doc had tried several experiments with the bottle from 1953. In none of them was he able to interact with the memory, though he could enter the space it filled and view it from any perspective he chose. The boy Merritt and old young John continued their low murmur of conversation, oblivious to his presence. He could look through the open window onto that long-ago evening, but the fireflies remained as intangible as the call of the whippoorwills, circling his hands but never settling. Once he attempted to touch the shoulder of the boy at the table, but the image had less substance than the mist rising from the stream. Each time, just before the vision faded, he watched a shape take form at the window, a slender boy with tangled hair, a dim glow flashing from his hands. "How did you do it?" Doc murmured. "And what else could you do if you tried?" Supper time. The elderly woman and the adolescent girl faced each other across the kitchen table. "It's spaghetti," said Betsy. "Try it. It's just like earthworms." Nellie pulled a long strand of spaghetti from her plate and sucked it into her mouth. She smiled. The girl was draped in one of Betsy's shawls, the only clothing she consented to wear, apart from jewelry. She no longer looked like the tar baby in the Uncle Remus story. The shell of black mud which had covered her since her death had flaked away. The rudimentary features of her face had evolved into those Betsy had known in her childhood. Betsy poured a glass of grape juice and pushed it across the table. Her sister lifted it with both hands and took 3 gulps. "Grape juice." She spoke the words with satisfaction. "We're progressing," said Betsy dryly. "This is cheese." She cut a piece and handed it to Nellie, not failing to notice the covetous look in the girl's eyes as she watched the knife. Nellie's habits remained inhuman. She refused to sleep in a bed and insisted on staying out of doors, especially in wet weather. Though she agreeably sampled the food Betsy offered her, her diet still consisted primarily of living things, fish and insects, birds and small animals. Betsy kept her reasonably clean by allowing her to lounge each day in a hot bath, listening to rock and roll music on the radio. Betsy tried keeping track of Nellie when she swam, mentally accompanying her on her strange ventures. The girl was familiar with every swirl and eddy of Vagabond Creek and the Mulberry River. She knew the secrets at the bottom of Moon Lake and could navigate the swamp even on the darkest night. She had no single home, only a series of dens hollowed out under the overhanging banks. Though unusual creatures inhabited the water, Nellie had never encountered another being like herself, and she suffered from something like loneliness. The thing which surprised Betsy the most was Nellie's apparent affection for Susanna Nelms. The little girl's companionship, her gifts and conversation, were drawing Nellie back into something that resembled human life. Susanna, apparently, had taught Nellie to speak, a thing Betsy herself had never been able to accomplish. "You wouldn't eat Susanna, even if you were very hungry?" Betsy had asked her. "Never, never," said Nellie, and her tone had been so emphatic that Betsy felt confident she was telling the truth. Some things were still unclear. When Nellie was upset, she would hunch over and swing about, more animal than human. She wept and growled about bad hat and whiskey, which made little sense to Betsy. Once she had dragged her halfway around the cove to the smoldering remains of a campfire. Our paths used to cross now and then. Looking at the ashes, Betsy found herself thinking of Dwight Will's grandfather, wasting away in the Talmadge Memorial Nursing Home. The memory was linked with an odor of ash, of a fire gone dead. Crowther was a creature of smoke and shadows, a traveler like herself, but someone not to be trusted. Nellie poked among the ashes, finding fishing line, lumps of coal, and bits of rusted chain. Ordinarily she kept such things as trinkets, but instead she turned from them and looked away toward the town. "Red boy," she said. When We Were Gone Astray is produced by Misty Valley Cooperative. It is the second book of the Forked Ways. The text and audiobook are copyright 2020 by Beau Farr. All rights reserved.